fill in all the gaps for you. Alright, so a little bit of history. First question, when would we start first using candles? Who first started using it? Any guesses?
I think I've seen candles in the Bible.
In the Bible? Yes. Anyone else? I know in the Bible they talk about the clay, still can find them as artifacts, clay lamps that were filled with oil. Supposedly, kind of referring to the question, the answer to it is the Egyptians and the Assyrians. As far as back in that time, the Romans used different methods with wax. Maybe not exactly candles, but later on, during the colonial times, is when candle making started becoming a really big deal. And the reason for that is they started using spermaceti wax, or from whales, or oil. So they would use that, and that was, back then, if you hear about whaling or know a little bit of history, that was a big time industry back then. Today, that's not going to happen. Let's see, so we have that. So if you look on your first page, what makes a candle is wax. So there's different types of waxes. Again, going back to the Egyptians, usually they would use wax to make figurines out of, and that you could find them in their tombs. The Assyrians would cover strings to cover bodies with wax after they were passed away. So different ways people used to use it. Then we came to candles. So different types of candles. We were talking about spermaceti. Also, there was tallow that was used during the colonial times. Tallow is more like a fat. But what happens is, the reason there are different types of waxes is because they all have different melting points and different levels of how much they smoke. So if you use tallow, it stinks and it's very smoky. So they would try to mix it with other waxes. Bayberry, today you can still use that, and they would use that back then. The only issue is for every 8 pounds of wax from a bayberry tree or bush is a pound of candle wax. So you had to have 8 pounds of leaves and berries to get the wax off and melt it down to get that 1 pound. So it's a lot of work, very expensive, but back then it smelled really well and had a good melting point. So it kind of talks about that a little bit more in here. Another thing today, and beeswax was another thing back then. Usually beeswax was very special. We used it a lot during the colonial times, but before that, when the Catholic Church had a high period, only the monks were allowed to use, I thought this was interesting, only allowed to use white beeswax candles. So later on, they were the only ones allowed to bleach it and use it that way, but everyone still would use beeswax for in other homes later on. So beeswax is still very expensive today. You can buy that at any store, any hobby store. And so we are using paraffin wax today. So that's what this is. Do y'all know where paraffin wax comes from and what it's made out of?
Oil.
I
saw it on your
oil.
sheet that said oil, yeah.
Out of oil, so this is made out of oil. It's got a pretty good melting point, pretty good burn. It does smoke a little bit, but this is in most of our candles today. So this is what most of us use. Not very eco-friendly. If you're really into eco-friendly, then I'd say beeswax. There's also soy candles. I'm not real familiar with the soy. We'll probably start experimenting with those more, just because we're an agricultural state park. So, and that's about it.
Soy candles are really popular at craft fairs.
All right, so we're going to make holes about this big. You want a hole big enough to fit your wick through. So we're going to try to poke that wick through your hole. So I have a hole about this big right here. If you want to pass that around, you can. If you want to pass it around, y'all can pass my pepperoni. Try to get it right in the center, because this is where your wick is going to go through, and it's going to sit in your candle. And I'll show y'all what you're going to make.
Which under the label probably says Pam. I was thinking, you just not use a spray and type of oil.
What I did is vegetable oil. I just wiped it down
Okay.
inside and just
Makes
wiped
sense.
off the extra drips. And it seemed to work, 'cause I got it out of
Well,
that.
it'd be anything to keep it separate from the.
Yeah. But if you want to use that, you can in your cups.
You're supposed to spray it now?
Yeah, if you want to. Yeah. If you want to, you can go ahead and spray your cups inside if you want. Or I got vegetable oil. Y'all can experiment if you want.
We'll try one out there.
I kind of using y'all as guinea pigs right now.
Yeah.
I've done it already, but this is the part
Spray.
I'm learning. Y'all want to use this? This
She's
is
gonna do one, I'm gonna do one.
okay. Well, there. Did y'all get the? You got spray. We'll pass this one. Also, the last but not least is mold sealer. So after we prime our wicks and tie it through, we're going to use mold sealer at that hole around that. We're going to knot it underneath your cup and then put some mold sealer around that knot. And that keeps it from leaking through. This is really, how do I say, this is extravagant.
More than you need.
Yeah, you don't have to have that. I just,
How much
now
do we
get
need?
fun.
Just a little bit?
It's just a light coating inside. Just get the whole thing inside, and we'll pass that around and get that to the others. All right, so I'm going to start heating the water. All right, who would like a wick? And what we're going to do, these are a little hot, but it's not too bad unless you really don't want to touch it. If you don't want to touch it, I'll just throw it on your table. And if you want to, you can, it's still pretty hot,
That's not bad.
but you can slide off all the wax that's on the outside if you want, or just leave it like it is. And we're going to stick it through our cup. Okay.
So go ahead and run it through the little hole?
Yeah, when you feel like it's warm enough, go ahead and run it through the hole. Okay, we're missing a wick. Are we missing a wick? Yeah, go ahead and pull your wick through. I have mold sealer if you like that, but tie a knot at the bottom of your cup, underneath. And here is some mold sealer if you want to pass this around. Basically it's clay. And all you're doing is taking a little bit of clay and sealing that underneath that, right above that knot.
So it can't leak through.
So it can't leak through. So y'all can pass that around if you want.
Oh, so we're not ready for that.
I think that's what she said.
What we're going to do is you're going to have two sticks, and you're going to crisscross them like this
Okay.
to keep your wick up.
I've only got one.
Yeah. So let me just stick a handful on this table here.
There we go, we got more than one now.
This should be good. We got one massacre cut so far. I think we're doing good. So let me give you 2 cents per table, and if y'all want to trade, you can. And 2 colors per table.
I want the red one.
You want a ring?
Yes.
I'll give you a ring. And y'all can switch. What we're going to do is pour in the wax. All you need to do is take a small handful, probably about, and you're going to use one of your sticks that I gave you. Probably about that much, maybe, in your cup. Try that first.
Do you put the sand in first or the?
Both of them at the same time.
Okay.
Does not matter. When you add scent to your candles, you always want to do it at the very end, because if you add it in the beginning and heat it up as it's boiling, you'll boil up that scent. You also, usually you want expensive oils if you're going to do some really nice candles. Right now we're just plain. So these are okay. So you want essential oils.
Essential oil.
Essential oil. Remember, add it at the end, not the beginning, so you'll melt it out, boil it out. Also, if you add too much oil, it'll leach out of your candle. This candle here was fresh rain. It did pretty good. I only added about 5 drops. So if you want to add a little bit more than that, you can try that. So we'll just see how that goes again, and then add a small handful of color if you want to play. We don't have a whole lot of time, so it's kind of harder to play, but usually I'm going to have y'all come up to me, and I'm going to pour it. I know.
Yeah, just move back and pour it on.
Usually there's a pour. How full do you want yours? All the way? Or do you want to do 2 different colors?
I think I'm just gonna do
I'll pour it to them.
it. I love that.
Only do 70%.
I see.
Give it kind of a different,
Well, and actually that's one of the styles to the candles they were showing. They'd add a color first and then add some sprinkle to the top and it barely melts.
now can you put the color in while it's cooking? And,
Yeah, usually that's what I do. And we'll do
Okay.
that next.
I think my wax needs
We won't
to be
do this
hotter,
again.
it's not wanting to.
That's, well, it'll be a
We're ready
style.
back here. If you'll-
This is kind of experimental.
Now, if you put some red with that, would that what the red?
Oh, you want red in there? Okay, we can do 2 different colors. What I'll do is halfway. Would you like that? And then we'll add more later?
Yeah.
Okay.
It
I'll just add it halfway and let you stir that in. And then I'll come back later. Just remind me to add to yours. Alright, so these are the beginning stages of a flower candle. So y'all got the basics down. This is just basics. There's a lot more fun things you can do with it. It's more professionally done. So this gives you an idea.
I like the red.
Okay, so were there 2 of y'all that wanted to add a different color later? Was that Miss Ann and Miss Teresa?
I'm sorry?
Well, does anyone have anything else after this that they would probably have to go as soon as